I was just thinking about how hard it was when I first started my practice and just chatting with different people about what to do, how to do it, which EHRs to use, how to do billing, just every step. I just remember it being really hard for me, and I'm not sure if you feel that way, but we've put together a whole community to help you really get to the next level of your practice. So whether you're in solo, starting a group, or already have a group, to me, just being around other people, getting access to ongoing information, that's really the way that you get to that next level. I wish I had had what we have over at practiceofthepractice.com/memberships. Over there, you're going to see just an outline of exactly how we can help you with having a sustainable solo practice, launching a group practice, or having a sustainable group practice. And you can explore all the tracks over there. You can watch some videos, see what some people have said, how they've really just grown at a different level. But for the cost of one counseling session, you can get major support for getting to that next level. And we do a 90-day money-back guarantee. If your practice is not thriving in 90 days, we'll give you all your money back. So again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/memberships. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1389.
Welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I'm Melissa Schneider, LCSW, dual practice founder, and one of our consultants here on Practice of the Practice, and I will be your host today. Today, we're continuing a conversation that is near and dear to my heart about what therapists actually earn and do out in solo practice. As you know, if you've been following our show, I'm trying to get us past this general myth that you'll always do better out in solo and instead equip us with a fact-based lay of the land of solo practice. Over the years, in the absence of readily available information, therapists have been going solo without really knowing what to expect, with little or no training in running a business. And while some fly high, others scrape by. And I don't want you to scrape by. I want my fellow therapists to be equipped to run a thriving and financially successful solo practice so that you can do this important work for your whole career, being comfortably supported by your calling. So, we've been digging into data and reports and talking to leading experts in our field to paint an accurate picture of life in solo practice. And today, I have the distinct pleasure of doing both of those things. We're going to be talking with Lindsay Oberleitner, Head of Clinical Strategy at SimplePractice, and the author of the recently released Annual State of Private Practice report that you've already been hearing about on this show. Lindsay, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time to get to talk with you today, Melissa.
Me too. So let me tell our listeners a little bit about you, and then we will dive in. So Lindsay is a PhD LP, which means she's a licensed clinical psychologist. And as I mentioned, she's the head of clinical strategy at SimplePractice, a large EMR. If you haven't heard of them, you've been living in a hole. And in her role, she gets to apply evidence-based practices to drive strategic clinical decision-making and advocate for mental health providers. Throughout her career, she has worked at the intersection of addiction, chronic health conditions, and the criminal justice system, underscoring her passion for advancing interdisciplinary training and collaboration. Her academic background includes a PhD from Wayne State University, a postdoctoral fellowship and faculty role at Yale University School of Medicine, ongoing leadership positions on the American Psychological Association's Continuing Ed Committee, and publishing over 40 peer-reviewed articles. Well, so Lindsay, you've done a few things, you know. So tell us a little bit about your role at SimplePractice and just sort of how you got into clinical strategy.
Absolutely. I'd love to share a little bit. So in my role at SimplePractice as the head of clinical strategy, I get to be involved kind of across the board to make sure that clinical perspective isn't just a review, but it's deeply part of how we think about and build tools that really work for individuals in private practice and independent practice. And being able to think about it, not just from kind of the angles that we're building, making sure we're building it in ways that like really meet the needs and gold standards that like we hold across the field of what it means to practice, what it means to run a business, all of those really challenging pieces that we need to manage day to day. And also being able to think about it as this report's an example from a clinical science angle of how do we continue to elevate the really important role that independent practice serves across the whole mental health and broader health ecosystem, which is a part that I really enjoy getting to do as well. So it's been
That's
really fun. And
amazing.
part of that transition into clinical strategy was I get excited about being able to figure out how we navigate changes as a field. I've always loved it. That was continuing ed for me too, and why I spent so much time in that space and in education and training programs as a supervisor. Is I love thinking about like where are we going next and how do we navigate it as a field and across licenses and across individuals. So that's what brought me here into strategy.
Wow, and what a timely moment in mental health history to be thinking about changes and trends and what is coming down the pike like really soon, right?
No
Yeah.
shortage of those. Yeah.
Yeah, no shortage of topics on that front, right? um, Wonderful. So, I was so thrilled. I'm a nerd, as you probably know. So thrilled to see the report come out from Simple Practice. And for those who haven't encountered it yet, this is the annual state of private practice, and Lindsay is the author of it. To see a data set of 245,000 clinicians just made me so happy. So tell me, like, how did you and Simple Practice decide that we needed this report? Like, what led to the creation of it being published in 2026?
Oh, this one was some time in the making and some real excitement from myself and others. And one of the biggest things to me, I'll say personally, in wanting to have the time to build out a report like this is I came from a background in times, as many of us do. I worked in medical settings. I worked in community mental health. I worked in places where we see, and there's data collected and reported out about what's happening and about the
Yes.
impact that those systems have, right? We hear it.
Yes. Right. Basic, national level reports, right? Things that are aggregated and published.
Totally. We know that it makes a difference and it does, right? This is not to say that those things don't matter. What it is to say is we're missing a whole chunk of the field when all we talk about are those pieces of the field and a really
Yes.
large sizable part of the field. So
Yes. And a growing part.
exactly. A seriously growing division of individuals. And as we know, many people move across their career into this space. So it's interconnected and we can't pretend it doesn't exist. And I think part of the problem has always been it's hard to look at when we're all sitting in our offices, right? I think about the solo practice I've had. Nobody knows what I'm doing or who I'm seeing.
Right. You don't have to publish earnings or publish a report, to people.
No,
Yeah.
nobody needs to know from the outside, especially when we think private pay, right? There's not a lens that kind of aggregates where people are sitting. So I was really motivated by that, not just because the data is missing. I mean, that's interesting, but because it means that we don't pay enough attention to how critical independent practice is to everything across the field and to how much of healthcare, mental health care occurs in this community of clinicians. And it deserves to be elevated both because we need to see what's happening and we need to understand the needs of the community a little better to be able to address and sustain that people aren't getting burnt out. They're getting their needs met. They're getting access to what they need to make their business thrive.
Yes. Yes. And just the access to actual information about like what to expect or what would be typical or what goal you might have is like really shooting for the stars so that people just can plan a business in a regular way. It's really needed. So I'm glad that you and Simple Practice wrote this report, and I'm excited to dig into it. So let's dive into some of our questions. So
Awesome.
you've spent months looking at this, and you can obviously fill out some of the details, but I know this is data from the more than 245,000 clinicians that use Simple Practice. And as the report mentioned, some might be in a group in one place and running a solo somewhere else. But you're seeing like the actual calendars, the actual sort of behavior day to week to month. What is the single biggest thing that therapists should understand about the state of private practice right now?
I think the biggest thing to me is really realizing, again, we can talk about the size of independent practice, but when I was able to dig in and look like, what do we mean? We know there's this many clinicians in a state, but where are they? I mean, clinicians in independent practice are serving, they're deep in rural regions and serving
Mm-hmm.
those communities. They're deep across all communities. And I think sometimes even as clinicians, we get this lens of like independent practice is this one kind of thing, this one image. And the diversity of ways of practicing, the diversity of locations and range of ways, and how deeply embedded across communities and fabrics. We took the time to kind of match up to like rural codes and some of those regions where we know are underserved. And there were over 7 million sessions completed by clinicians in those regions in rural spaces.
Wow.
We just don't hear about that ever.
That's amazing. Wow. 7 million sessions delivered in rural locations. What makes a location rural? Is there an official definition?
There is. Spent a lot of time on this definition.
You're like, I can quote that one.
We have what are called RUCA codes nationally, RUCA, and you can look up those rural classification codes and map kind of zip codes across to be able to determine like how rural is the region. Within the report, we're able to look at kind of the most rural versus, what meets our rural definition more broadly. But even in those regions, private practice serves a huge part of those communities.
Wow. And I wouldn't be surprised if there might be less presence from like your national brand or your major marketing because that's like such a tiny market.
Right, absolutely. Well, and I think for a long time, I think the interesting thing is we've seen some companies and groups try to be like, we'll solve rural mental health by bringing in telehealth or these, and not all of them have made it. And I think part of it is
Hmm.
this is the power of private practice. Why I find that piece so meaningful is you are part of your community. You are
Yes, you live there.
part of it, right? You know it and you're embedded. It's so different when you can understand the community you're serving and you're part of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, what's one conclusion you think people might draw from the report that they think would be right, but that you actually think would be incorrect?
That's a great question. I think one of the things so the report was both kind of large aggregate data, as you mentioned, also a survey of clinicians and being able to understand how they feel. So over 2,000 clinicians responded to us. And one of the things that we saw was the high satisfaction rate with private practice. And I would not deny that. There's a lot of reasons, and we hear this time and time again. Like, this is an ideal. You get to design how you want to practice clinically, how you want to practice, all of those things.
Yes.
Incredibly true. I think the thing that we'd go too far to assume is that satisfactions means there aren't problems to solve. In that same
Hmm.
survey, we asked questions about like, what were your biggest drains in the past year? Not the words we use, but like biggest pain
Right.
you had in the past year in practice. And I mean, those burdens of how to manage insurance, those burdens of loneliness and isolation,
Hmm.
those burdens of another question, 43% said they had zero business training before going into
Yeah.
those are burdens
Which
and pain.
doesn't surprise me at all. Where would you even get business training? Right. You'd have to seek it out, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not deeply embedded in our like trainings, right? No matter, even though we know
No.
many people go into private practice, it's just not there.
Exactly. Yes. And Rutgers and Columbia, if you're listening, I've been reaching out being like, why don't we have this? Shouldn't you like make a business track? Because you can't do it right when you graduate, right? That's not the right time to open a business. It's maybe
Right.
grad school isn't even the right place to like fully master it, but there should be a reputable place to come back to that can just educate like across the country. So,
Agreed. I second that.
yeah, we're gonna do this, Lindsay. Oh, yes. And that really jives with something I've been talking about in some of our other episodes. That I kept thinking I had one side of the coin wrong. And I was like, okay, I see that people in solo practice aren't earning as much as I thought, but they seem really satisfied. I was like, that can't be right. Maybe they're not as satisfied as I think, or maybe they're earning more than I think. And what I've come to, at least at this point, is I think both things are true, which is kind of what you're saying, right? People are like so happy with the frame of solo practice, the experience of it, but it's not earning for them what it may need to for them to do it for like 20 years, right? Which is what I'm worried about. Like, how do we keep you in the field and make sure this solo practice gig is delivering, not just satisfying, right?
Absolutely. That it's that, and we did ask like intention to stay in private practice. And again, incredibly high.
Like 90% or more, right? We're like, I'm going to keep doing this. Yeah.
I like this setting, right? And I'm sure we can all own my previous history of working and running a clinic in community mental health. It's hard work. It's hard. And you don't always have the freedom to practice in all of the spaces and treat the individuals you want to treat. There are settings where you have less of that individual control as you develop, right? I loved community mental health. I loved medical settings. I also then loved being like, I know myself now and I know how I like to practice and I know who I want to see. And we can see why that's so satisfying. But again, it doesn't mean that it's without pains, right? It is definitely with pains that need worked out by not just individuals, but the system.
Yes, the system. I couldn't agree more. So let's talk a little bit more about all of these interesting findings. So this next question is, I still just can't even guess the answer. So I'm so curious to hear what you have to say. So your report found that roughly 60% of therapists have availability within the next 7 days. And yet consumers still consistently say it's hard to find a therapist or people aren't getting back to them. What is happening? Do we have a therapist shortage? Do we have a therapist matching problem? Is it something else?
Oh, I love that. I've thought about this one so much. This one's near and dear to our heart because we see this in our data, right? We know that clinicians have availability. In fact, clinicians will tell us on platform they're looking for ways to grow their caseload. And then we hear all of the news about not being able to access providers. And, I'm sure many of us have experienced that ourselves when we're looking for care for a loved one. Even if we're in the field, it's hard to find that match, right? It's hard to find someone. I know. I think one of the biggest things is that sometimes if you go to the internet and you search, find a therapist near me, what you're not going to find first on that first page probably is all of those individual practices, whether they're group practices that are independent group practices, the independent solos. They're not the first things that come up. The marketing dollars are not the same, right? Of what can be invested. And that means that there's a visibility problem in part that we need to solve with many directions. Technology, I'll take some ownership. We need to figure out how to solve that. Like, you can be independent and be able to be on those pages, right? To be able to be visible and accessible. But I think it's that visibility and it's that match. How do the people who need care actually know that that person's sitting maybe 2 miles away from their home, there and available?
With like an opening tomorrow, right?
Exactly. So I think being able to we keep seeing that as something that we need to work in. And, we've been putting some effort into like the directory that we run, because online appointment scheduling, for those who want to use it, it doesn't work for everyone in their practice and their style, but for those who do, there's a real power of like, I come from the addiction treatment world as my specialty, and we do a lot of that, like in the moment, access us now kind of thing. And I think there's something close to it when you're like, even if it's not, you can walk in my door right now, I can schedule with you a couple days from now, does reduce that burden for a patient that they can show up, right? They are like, I made a step and I've committed, so I'm going to keep moving down this direction. So that ability to keep building those type of options for the clinicians for whom it works for.
Yes.
As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using Therapy Notes. They make billing, scheduling, note-taking, telehealth, and e-prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout.
It's so funny that you mentioned sort of the decision maybe to not allow online booking. This is like another soapbox of mine, but I usually really encourage clinicians, and I'd love to know what you think of this, to turn on online booking. I think a lot of times the worry is, what if someone like books an appointment and they're like so wrong for me, like I don't do any of the things they need, they've like wasted their time. But what I've sort of, we had always said in my group practice and what I say to consulting clients is, it's perfectly ethical and helpful and appropriate for you to do that initial assessment. Think of it like the doctor checkup, right? You might not be the right therapist, but your client doesn't know that, right? They're just trying to find a therapist, right? You might say, you know what, I think I'm seeing some OCD here. I think I'm seeing, the need to consider medication or something else. It could just be a specialty that is not part of your wheelhouse, right? And then you can make that referral. But you still get the intake session, which actually pays at a higher rate, so it just makes business sense. You deliver like the immediate support to that client who is like, I wish I could see somebody. And it just like, then you can refer to a colleague that you know and love that maybe they also wouldn't have been able to find. So yeah, it makes sense to me that like if you're filtering, from the top of the internet, right, you're finding like ZocDoc or, BetterHelp or something like that, right? You're not finding the like amazing therapist who's been in practice for 27 years in your community who also takes that and has an opening this Wednesday, right. Because it's just harder to find us.
I think they're there. To your point, they're there.
Yes,
right?
They're there. Right. Yeah. Okay, that's amazing. So that's a good lead into my next question. So SimplePractice, I've been kind of struck lately just noticing what seems to me like kind of really trying to reimagine what an EMR could be. You're making this bigger push into helping therapists get clients. There was like a thing called Meet Monarch a few years that then sort of reappeared as Therapy Finder. I'm seeing more like, hey, you can get credentialed, and it just seems like a lot of new things are coming out. And so I'm curious, is SimplePractice like attempting to kind of push into the space that is maybe being created by platforms like Headway and Alma to serve providers and make it easier to run that successful solo practice? Like, tell us a little bit about that strategy.
Yeah, I love that question. I think, the thing that I always reflect on is there's not one way to solve these problems, but we know they're the very real problems of practice, right? So
yes.
Being able to keep a referral flow, being able to manage getting credentialed with insurance payers that you want to work with, being able to do those things are real pains. We're like, there's no question, right? Like
nobody's favorite thing, right? Nobody's like, oh, I love getting credentialed.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's what I would say is we're trying to think like, what are the ways in which our mission is deeply to help independent practice thrive? Again, regardless of what size that is, solo through larger groups, but those that are independent and choose their pathway to be able to have choice in what they do. So they may choose to work with other platforms to manage their billing. We want them to have the option to keep it under their own self and their own paneling if that's what they want to do, right? This is about having choice in the field and about having control in the field. And we believe deeply in that you should be able to make those choices, and it shouldn't be because you feel like you have to go a certain way. You shouldn't feel like you have to roll up into another space or go other places from independent practice because you can't manage those pieces. We want to make it easy. So you're right. We've been doing a lot in this space of how do we connect in? How do we work on some of that traffic? To go back to the earlier question about 60% say they have availability. Right. We should be able to help with that, right? And I think we're deeply trying to figure out what are those answers. Credentialing, as you mentioned, has been one of them. Reimagining Therapy Finder, as you can imagine, Monarch by a name isn't quickly found to be a therapist director.
Yes, right. You're like, let's just keep it simple, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
So how do we keep doing that? And then it's our job also to think like, how does that get in front of people, right? Like we can't I remember deeply there were times in my practice where I worked a lot with criminal justice. It was me going with my cookies to parole, to probation. And as much as I love those connections and I don't regret any of that, it shouldn't have to take that, right? Like we can find ways to get, how do we get profiles of people who want to connect with more patients in front of those connections that they need without having to go and walk door to door delivering cookies,
Yes.
right?
You're like, it's 2026 people. We can do this, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Building those connections, building into that space, ensuring that shouldn't ever be the reason that practice doesn't make it. To go back to the point that we often hear, there's people not getting care who need it, not getting enough clients, not getting in front of the right clients that make you excited about your work. And not having that happen should never be the reason that someone has to leave their practice and do something else if it's what they love. So we're going to continue to be investing in that space of how do we do it to give you choice as a clinician of how you want to enroll with insurance, how you want to think about your profiles, who you want those in front of. You'll see us continue to grow in that space.
So this is meant to be an annual State of Private Practice report. So let's picture you're publishing it 5 years from now. It's 2031. What number do you imagine will have changed the most?
Oh, I can answer this 2 ways, and it's which one do I think will change the most? Which ones do I hope will change the most?
That's good. Yes.
I'll stick to the what do I think will change the most. I mean, I will go back to that. Like, we don't get training. I mean, when I say I got 0, I got like anti-training in business and grad.
Yes, right. Like marketing is evil and you just shouldn't do that, right?
And you get that even as you go on to like post-degree training and I really think that's a number we're going to fix. I really think that some of those burdens that come on because of that, and you'll see in the report some of the things that were highlighted in like what's the biggest pain. It's like managing financial pieces, stability, and all of that. I hope that we continue to build in a way that means, yes, that number is like 0 have gotten none.
Right.
And that we also have made it easy to reduce what goes along with that, which is like, there's lots of things that really stink about setting stuff up that are external, like how do you manage your health insurance as an individual when you're in private practice running a business?
Right.
How do you connect into the bigger kind of like community of small businesses around you beyond just practices, but to figure out how to solve these things. I really hope that number is 0 of no training in 5 years.
That's great. I agree with this hoped for future state. Yes, business training all around, right?
Absolutely. If I were to say my real hope, though, of like what number do I really hope will be different in 5 years, that gap between private pay and insurance pay, I think, is one that I think we need an answer to. What we know is year over year, insurance visits are going up because individuals want to use the insurance they have, because we've done some good things as a country to expand that more people have insurance and insurance
yes.
for
and no, it covers therapy. That was like not known before the pandemic, right?
It really wasn't, right? Like people just didn't know they could use it, how they could use it, how to even reach out. And I think as we see that grow, this gap is really important to be able to address. And I think I don't have all the answers of how that goes away, but it shouldn't matter in my mind how a patient is coming in and getting billed. You're doing the work and you should get reimbursed for the work that you're doing. And we need to continue to figure out what that means, right? And I don't think there's easy answers there. So that's why I'm putting that in there. That's the strong hope.
Right. The strong hope. Yes. Well, and yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, you hear things all the time of like, oh, social workers with the lowest paid master's degree, or, just appreciating even when we get our fee schedule that they're like, well, this is what we'd pay a doctor to do therapy. We're going to give you less, and this is what we'd pay a PhD to do therapy. And then we're going to give our master's level less than that, and just wondering like, how did we decide I'm 25 or 35% less valuable than an MD who maybe doesn't have psychotherapy training?
There's big questions to be asked in that, I think. And not just, it's not incremental. I think that's the thing to me is like, what I hope is between now and 5 years from now, it's not incremental changes of like, oh, we could shift that percentage a little bit. I hope it's
Right.
like thinking of like, how do we value and really understand the value of mental health care and make sure that the clinicians that are doing that work are getting reimbursed fairly for what they're doing in a way that feels equivalent and not lesser than, right?
Yes.
Medical appointment or whatever it may be.
Exactly. And I mean, it just strikes me that like if people really enjoy the setting of solo practice, I feel like maybe we've solved half of the problem, right? It's better than a clinic, it's better than this or that. And that I think larger form advocacy from bigger groups and organizations and even technology platforms
Yeah.
can begin to move the needle. And I mean, I am happy to say, in the 7 years since I first opened my group, we've seen a couple insurances raise our rate like $30 or something very significant, which is huge. And then we've seen other ones just, crickets, right? Still the same and no response to renegotiation letters. Let's end with our juicy question. So, if you were opening a solo practice, it's 2026. If you planned to use SimplePractice and you wanted to kind of build upon the best lessons from the annual State of Private Practice report, how would you design your practice?
Ooh, I love that. So many pieces, but let me try to narrow to a couple. I mean, the biggest thing I would say, this isn't sidestepping, I'll come back to like the exact pieces, but is that what we heard from people about the biggest things that they enjoyed in practice were when they grew clinically in the spaces they were excited about. It wasn't about, they were a little bit about the financial piece, they were a little bit about other things, but it was like loving the passion for like being able to find their space and their specialty and deepen it and grow in it and see their patients getting the outcomes that they were hoping for in that space. And I think it really needs to come to that. I think sometimes when we're starting, and I've been there, is you're so worried about getting started and how to build that you don't think about what do I want and who do I want to serve, where do I fit and where do I get excited, right? Like I know what excites
Yes.
me now clinically, but I don't think I did 10 years ago. I think I had a harder time narrowing that in. So being able to
Right.
like start with that passion and like match it and do it and believe in yourself to like build to that, because I think that's where we see people saying like I'm fulfilled when I do.
Yes.
But in the kind of more specifics of that, there's a whole lot of numbers in the report that address this. I won't dig into the specifics, but a lot of people seem to find a lot of success having that mix of like I'm doing some insurance and some self-pay. I'm finding the mix that works for me because I'm aiming for, a certain goal. And there's a whole range of ways in which people practice because of that and what they're aiming for. But starting with that aim and like doing something we don't always do because we're passion driven is to say, what if I were to put this in an Excel sheet and say, if I did this percentage of this, this percentage
Yes.
self-pay, this percentage insurance pay, because I hear lots of reasons. I feel it, right? Like I believe in being able to make it more accessible, and everyone has their different reasons for a different approach.
Mm-hmm.
But if you believe in that and you want that mix, aim for it, right? Like truly, like look and sketch it out of like what would it take of what balance and the flexibility. I think if anything, what I've seen, I'm struck by the amount of people who are now practicing in ways that it's the mix of in-person and telehealth. We used to hear like there's so much of like, which camp are you? Are you a virtual practice, an in-person practice? And the truth is so many have this kind of hybrid. And I think part of what
Yes.
makes that really successful is it's also it meets your needs of like I can have some flexibility in my schedule as a clinician, also meets a more diverse kind of patient need and varying patient need even within a single patient, right? So seeing that
Yes.
like true mix being one of the more common ways of practicing, I think I really would say like that's a great consideration of being able to hit the balance. And again, we have to find what works for us. So I think part of what I would take from the report is every different method of that. You could mix and match that matrix of, you could be fully virtual, you could be fully self-pay, you can have a successful practice, but it's got to start. That's why I said it wasn't fully a sidestep, but it's got to start from that passion of, I'm excited about it because of this, and this works for me. And then you can push through all the rest, right?
I love that. So design by leading with specialties that energize you, where you're doing your best work. Love that. Consider that mix of insurance and self-pay, and maybe as you get more experienced and have more years in, you can inch up that self-pay side and lower down the insurance side. And then also considering that mix of in-person and telehealth, which I completely agree with, even if it's mostly just for the SEO, GEO, and the ability to see the occasional kid in your office. Just being on the map means that you're doing something that the telehealth giants aren't, and so people will find you.
Yes, that is a big one. It's the finding. It's that, exactly that.
Yeah, the finding, right? That is the problem, right?
And it's a real thing. Like when you're thinking about building those relationships, if you want to build into like healthcare, like you want referrals from your primary care, like people are looking for it sometimes. There are people who feel very strongly. So having the mix does it gets you a step ahead in some ways because your practice meets kind of all needs.
Exactly. And sometimes you're surprised. It can also be more energizing to meet in person with a client, right? You're not fiddling with your mouse or trying to do 2 screens or something. You're just talking to a human, right?
For sure. And acknowledging that for there's seasons of life in which one or the other way may work better, right? I have 3 young kids. There are times where it's like virtual is how my world survives.
Yes. Or getting me out of the house is how my world survives, right? And you can choose, right?
Exactly. It's a little of both. So I think it's matching that need. That's why I always go back to the, like, all of them can be successful, even if some of those maybe give you a slight advantage. I think the thing is like knowing like this actually works for me. If in-person doesn't work for you, planning a fully in-person practice, it's not going to be successful.
Terrible.
It doesn't match.
Don't do that. Right. Exactly. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that we got to go over all of that. So just in the final bit here, what would you encourage folks, a lot of us already use SimplePractice, or maybe people are choosing an EMR. What would you say is like just the single takeaway about kind of what your EMR should be able to do for you?
I think your EMR should, at the end of the day, at the highest level, it should make your life easier, not harder, right? Like life should be easier. And we've been through periods in mental health, and I've been in the field long enough to know them when it felt like technology made your life harder.
Yeah.
And now we should be at a space where like your EMR should bring it as much as it can in-house for you. One place, you can show up to one screen. The work is hard enough. This part of the work shouldn't be harder. And it should reduce all of those pains of being able to, you should see your billing right there. You should see your schedule. You should be able to automate those parts of your practice that are automatable, to make up a word.
Yes.
As much as possible, and have technology support you to do that, so you don't have to create new systems. Every person out of these 245,000 clinicians in this data set, that would be the worst outcome possible to me, as if everyone felt like they had to create their own methods to do things and figure it out on their own. If you want to, awesome. You shouldn't have.
Right.
It should just be easy to set it up, and it should be easy to set up a practice and roll right into it and just do the work you enjoy, that part of the work.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lindsay. It's been a pleasure.
I so enjoyed talking with you, Melissa. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I've been really excited for the chance to talk with you today.
Absolutely. It's been lovely to have you. For our listeners, I just want to say thanks for joining us today for this really interesting conversation. I'm your host, Melissa Schneider, and I'll be doing a monthly show, so look out for more episodes digging into these kinds of big trends in our industry, the things that are changing, digging into the numbers, and always zeroing in on practical tips for how you can thrive in your solo or group practice. If you want to consult with me about anything practice related, head over to practiceofthepractice.com/apply. You'll get to meet with Joe, do a pre-consulting call, and find out if this kind of support is right for you. If you have comments or questions about this episode or things you'd like to see on the show, shoot me an email at melissa@practiceofthepractice.com. And lastly, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsor of today's show.
Therapy Notes is the best electronic health records out there. They've been a supporter for years, but even more importantly, they can help you grow and scale your business with their EHR. They have embedded in their system their own virtual way, similar to Zoom, of doing HIPAA-compliant teletherapy. They'll help you move from your current billing platform over to Therapy Notes. They have amazing customer service. A lot of these EHRs only have, text support or chat, but you can actually talk to a real person that will help you out if you get stuck. A couple years ago, I remember I had a client that had switched over and the old company wasn't releasing the things, and Therapy Notes did such an amazing job of coordinating so that therapist could get back to doing therapy instead of worrying about her EHR. They're an amazing company. Head on over to therapynotes.com. Use promo code JOE, J-O-E, at checkout to get a couple months for free. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.